I'm Mark Pompilio. Coming up on News 13, the Supreme Court makes a far-reaching ruling about an abortion law. We'll look at its possible effect on women in the Carolinas. Next on News 13 at 6, the Supreme Court rules on an abortion law. In our top story, we find out what the ruling means to Carolina women. The trial for this man stops temporarily because of something that happened in the courtroom. We'll go live to the Asheville airport to see some jet age improvements. And what a marriage. This Rutherford County couple has been married longer than most people live.
And from the new McCormick Field, we're going to be bringing you the weather tonight, where the WLOS All-Stars are taking on the Pathetics from KISS FM and WWNC. We'll tell you about the game and the weather in just a few minutes.
Join us for our top story coverage about today's abortion ruling next on News 13 at 6.
News at 13, bringing you immediate live coverage from across the Carolinas. This is News 13 at 6, with the latest local news, weather, and sports.
Good evening. I'm Mark Pompilio. Darcel and Bob are off tonight. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled today about a Pennsylvania law that regulates abortions. The ruling has possible implications for women in every state, including here in the Carolinas. We have top story coverage tonight about the Supreme Court's decision. In brief, it does not overturn the historic Roe versus Wade decision, which allows abortions. Abortions are still legal, but the ruling makes it easier for states to restrict abortions. Some states might decide to do that, some might not. We begin our top story coverage by explaining what the Supreme Court decided about the Pennsylvania law. It upheld these 4 provisions of the law. Pennsylvania women seeking abortion must be told about fetal development and alternatives to ending their pregnancies. Women must wait at least 24 hours after receiving that information. Unmarried girls under age 18 and not supporting themselves must get the consent of one of their parents or a state judge. And doctors must keep detailed records about each abortion they perform. But the justices refused to uphold this provision. It required married women to tell their husbands about their plans for an abortion. Abortion opponents cheer the court decision. They claim abortions takes the lives of children, and they hope states will pass restrictions on abortion. But pro-choice supporters worry the court has stripped women of the right to decide their own medical treatment. News 13's Cheryl Barber talked to people on both sides of the abortion issue.
This is 12 weeks.
Anti-abortion activist Meredith Hunt holds a plastic model of a 12-week-old fetus. It's a tool he uses to show people what the fetus looks like during the stage of development when most abortions occur.
A lot of women, once they have a chance to learn about what their unborn babies are going to look like, are going to decide to let them live and not go through with the abortion.
Hunt believes the court gave anti-abortion forces a victory today. He says the court continues to chip away at the blanket approval of abortion granted by the Supreme Court in the early 70s.
It's going to save lives in Pennsylvania and other states that go ahead with the waiting period and the informed consent. It's going to probably reduce teen pregnancy in Pennsylvania and other places where they have parental consent.
I think there are going to be a lot of girls who are going to be in trouble and who are going to be seeking abortions and will still get them, but illegally.
Susan Park says Planned Parenthood doesn't automatically recommend abortion to any woman, but is worried the court has removed the choice women now have in some states.
I see this as being an unfortunate time for people who are pro-choice. I think that the pendulum has swung very far right, and that we have become a very conservative society in many ways, and one of those ways is a woman's right to make decisions about the reproductive functions of her own body.
Both sides agree the abortion battle now shifts to state legislatures, where lawmakers might decide what restrictions, if any, to put on abortion. Cheryl Barber, News 13, Buncombe County.
We continue our top story coverage about the Supreme Court ruling now. Let's take a look at the difference between abortion restrictions in the Carolinas. North Carolina passed one of the nation's most liberal abortion laws 25 years ago. The law permits abortions in the first 20 weeks of pregnancy. Doctors may perform those abortions in a state-licensed clinic or hospital. After the first 20 weeks of pregnancy, doctors must perform abortions only in a hospital. North Carolina does not require unmarried women under 18 to get parental consent for an abortion. And there's no requirement a woman must live in North Carolina before getting an abortion. In South Carolina, during the first trimester, which is the first 12 weeks of the pregnancy, women over 16 years old can have an abortion on demand. During the second trimester, women who want abortions must get them in a hospital, not a clinic. And during the third trimester, South Carolina allows an abortion only to preserve the woman's health. Girls under 16 years old must have the consent of a parent or guardian before they can have an abortion in South Carolina. But what might happen with Carolina abortion laws in the future? They might be very different. The National Abortion Rights League ranks North Carolina among 10 states most likely to keep abortion pretty much unrestricted, and it ranks South Carolina among 10 states likely to restrict abortion. News 13's Judy Fleming reports about a restriction already proposed in South Carolina that some think has a good chance of becoming law.
This is roughly a 9-week fetus right here.
This is what women would have to listen to and look at before they have an abortion under what's known as South Carolina's Informed Consent Bill.
And that bill passed the House, but it did not pass the Senate.
The bill would require doctors to share information with women who want to have an abortion, information like health risks women face, development of a fetus, and alternatives to abortion. Some legislators say they defeated the bill because they didn't know the Supreme Court would give states the right to regulate. That changed with today's ruling in Washington.
Now the Senate has no reason not to pass it, and the House will pass it again next year.
It's possible we may see some regulation in the next year or two.
But not if the group now accomplishes its goal to elect only pro-choice candidates.
People don't want these bills. They don't want the government intruding in their private lives, and that's exactly what these bills do.
The Informed Consent Bill doesn't come up for a vote again in South Carolina until the legislature reconvenes in 1993. Judy Fleming, News 13, Greenville.
Now here's the bottom line about what the Supreme Court ruling on the Pennsylvania abortion law means. It gives states broader powers to restrict abortions, and it could become a political hot potato for candidates running for seats in state legislatures. That's because legislatures might consider laws to restrict abortions. But the Supreme Court also ruled that states may not outlaw all abortions. So the Roe v. Wade decision, which allows abortions, is still intact. Most anti-abortion advocates are pleased about what happened today. Most pro-choice advocates are not. In other news tonight, a district attorney's words of welcome to potential jurors caused a delay.
If you wish a printed transcript of this evening's program, please send $5 to Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado. To order a video cassette version, use your Visa or MasterCard and call 1-800-ABC-7500. The cost is $19.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
This has been a special presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
America is watching ABC.
Up next on Nightcast, the Supreme Court upholds a Pennsylvania law that restricts abortion. Tar Heel Highway inspectors charge an Asheville company with illegal clear cutting. And move over Michael and Clyde, here comes Buddy, the hoop-shooting golden retriever. Join us for those stories and more next on Nightcast.
According to a survey, 66% of U.S. businessmen wear these too tight.
Belts, underwear, boxers, shirts,
Wednesday, July 1st. NewsSat 13, bringing you immediate live coverage from across the Carolinas. This is News 13 Nightcast, the latest local news, weather, and sports.
Good evening, everyone. Bob and Darcel have the night off. The justices of the Supreme Court have made their ruling on a controversial abortion law in Pennsylvania. But tonight it is difficult to declare winners and losers in the debate. The court did uphold most of the provisions in Pennsylvania's restrictive abortion law. That by itself has angered and frustrated supporters of abortion rights. But in a 5-4 decision, the court reaffirmed the 19-year-old Roe v. Wade ruling, guaranteeing a woman's constitutional right to abortion. For anti-abortion forces, nothing could be worse. Protesters on both sides of the abortion issue gathered in front of the Supreme Court today, hoping for a clearer decision than what the justices handed down. The court upheld the key parts of a Pennsylvania law restricting abortion: that doctors inform women of the risks and alternatives to abortion, that women then wait at least 24 hours before getting one, that minors get permission from a parent or a judge. But the court rejected a provision requiring married women to notify their husbands and proclaimed its undue burden test that will govern future reviews of abortion law. In defining this new test, Reagan and Bush appointees O'Connor, Kennedy, and Souter argued that states should have power to regulate abortion, but they have no authority to place a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking abortion.
The blood of 30 million children is already crying out to Almighty God for vengeance, and today 3 Reagan-Bush appointees stabbed the pro-life movement in the back and affirmed the bloodshed.
In the past 3 weeks, more than 400 Operation Rescue protesters have been arrested in Milwaukee. After today's decision, they see no reason to ease away from their fight. In Pennsylvania, the state's restrictive law has been on hold, challenged in court from the first moment it was signed 2.5 years ago. But those who support abortion see today's decision as a clear loss. They call it a green light to throw up obstacles to legal abortion. For example, the 24-hour waiting period could require the expense and inconvenience of 2 trips to a clinic or an overnight stay.
This places a burden on rural women that is heavier than the burden it places on urban women, because rural women often travel as much as 1.5 to 3 hours to get their services in Pennsylvania.
Well, we have heard the law in Pennsylvania and how it restricts abortion, but how do the laws here in the Carolinas compare? And will lawmakers consider changing them in the wake of this ruling? First, the laws. North Carolina passed one of the nation's most liberal abortion laws 25 years ago. The law permits abortions in the first 20 weeks of pregnancy. Doctors may perform those abortions in a state-licensed clinic or hospital. After the first 20 weeks of pregnancy, doctors must perform abortions only in a hospital. North Carolina does not require unmarried women under 18 to get parental consent for an abortion. And there's no requirement a woman must live in North Carolina before getting an abortion. In South Carolina, during the first trimester, which is the first 12 weeks of the pregnancy, women over 16 years old can have an abortion on demand. During the second trimester, women who want abortions must get them in a hospital, not a clinic. And during the third trimester, South Carolina allows an abortion only to preserve the woman's health. Girls under 16 years old must have the consent of a parent or guardian before they can have an abortion in South Carolina. As for changing the laws, observers say North Carolina is not likely to see any changes that could restrict abortion. But in South Carolina, a bill that would require doctors to give women counseling before an abortion cleared the House this year, but didn't make it through the Senate. Many believe it will be reintroduced next year. And now for the reaction closer to home. Buncombe County anti-abortion activists say the court gave them a victory today. They say the ruling is another small chip away from the right to abortion guaranteed by Roe versus Wade.
It's going to save some lives. It's going to save lives in Pennsylvania and other states that go ahead with the waiting period and the informed consent. It's going to probably reduce teen pregnancy in Pennsylvania and other places where they have parental consent.
But Planned Parenthood counselors worry the decision could remove the choice a woman has to decide her own medical treatment.
I see this as being an unfortunate time for people who are pro-choice. I think that the pendulum has swung very far right, and that we have become a very conservative society in many ways. And one of those ways is a woman's right to make decisions about the reproductive functions of her own body.
One of the upshots of today's ruling that we haven't mentioned yet, abortion could shift from being a hot potato in national races to one for state lawmakers, as the Supreme Court makes it apparent that it is leaving the issue up to individual states. There was another ruling handed down by the Supreme Court today that made a South Carolina man very happy. David Lucas paid almost $1 million for 2 beachfront lots near Charleston. Then the state of South Carolina.
News 13 at noon on WLOS TV.
I welcome back to Talkback. We are taking up the issue of abortion today. We'd like to remind our callers to please address your questions to one or the other of our guests. Joining us again, Meredith Hunt from Life Advocates and Bonnie Smith from the National Organization for Women. Let's go to the phone lines now. Our first caller is from Canton. This is Talkback. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, my question is why do there's so much fight against abortion? Why do women take birth control pills? What's the difference?
Well, I'll go ahead and address that. In some cases, there's not a difference between abortion and birth control because some birth control forms are abortifacient, which means they expel a fertilized ovum from the womb.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
If they could be more specific.
Caller. Okay, we'll move on to the next question now. Again, we are discussing abortion. This is Talkback, and our next caller is from Graham County. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, I have more or less a comment. I think that abortion should be legal, as there are people that need the abortion, and it's better that they have the abortion than to bring a child into this world unwanted and unable to take care of it. Any comments?
Ms. Smith, first of all, are you worried that this ruling yesterday might, in effect, mean the death of Roe versus Wade?
I think the consensus is that although the court did not overrule Roe v. Wade, it's chipping away at a woman's right to an abortion. It's making more and more difficult for women to seek abortions, making more women likely to seek an illegal abortion or try to perform the abortion themselves, which will result in women's deaths.
Okay, again, this is Talkback. We are discussing abortion today. We have two guests joining us for opposing views on the issue. We'll go back to the phones. Our next caller is from Candler. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, my question is for Meredith Hunt. And first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the stand that you've taken on abortion with Life Advocates and the work that you're doing to combat the worst form of child abuse in this nation. My question is, what can we as private citizens of North Carolina do to further the cause and to have more restrictive laws about abortion? What can we do as citizens to let them know that we want more restrictive laws on abortion in North Carolina since it's so liberal?
Okay, I think that there's many forms of political action that people can be involved in, including lobbying. Education is always helpful. Sometimes people may want to run for office, but I think what we're finding is that what we need to change the law to protect children, but more than that, in order to change the law, we need to have a heart change with people. People need to be touched by the deaths of these children, and we need to begin making sacrifices and making this a very high priority in our lives. And that may include some people willing to risk arrest to protect the children as they would for even a born child.
Let's go back a minute, if we may, in talking about the difference perhaps in North and South Carolina laws here. In North Carolina, it is seen more unlikely to change. North Carolina law permits abortions in the first 20 weeks of pregnancies in a state licensed clinic or hospital. After that, only by a doctor in a hospital. Unmarried women under 18 do not have to have parental consent, and the woman does not have to live in North Carolina. South Carolina, on the other hand, much more conservative and more likely to change in the event that this gets into state legislatures. Does this worry you that it's become now a battle on the home front, that we're going to see this, going to state legislatures now?
Actually, I'm thrilled about it. Women are having a chance now to talk to their legislators. They're having a good reason to get in some dialogue with the lawmakers and express their views. And in fact, in South Carolina, there's a push to encourage women to run for public office themselves, especially pro-choice women, and encourage them to become the lawmakers, and in that sense, become empowered and represent more of the South Carolina public.
All right, let's go back to the phones now. Our next caller from Asheville. Go ahead, caller.
Yes. Why do you think that women shouldn't have a choice to make their own decision on abortion? And this is for Mr. Hunt.
Well, really the onus is upon people who believe in choice to show that there is a significant difference between children before they're born and children after they're born. You're certainly not going to advocate women having a choice to kill their newborn babies, but what's the difference between a minute before birth or a minute before that or a week before that? So I would just throw the question back to you. Why should women have the choice to kill their children?
Caller, do you have a response?
That is a good point, but you know, the way our government is these days, they're whittling away at our rights, and I just feel like that, you know, the more they whittle, the tighter things are going to get, and then we're going to end up like some of these other third world countries. You know, we're just not going to be any better off than they are.
Well, I think that we are probably much worse than they are, because some of the third world countries do protect unborn children, but you still haven't, I don't mean to be rude, but you still haven't answered the question, what's the difference between a child before they're born and a child after they're born? And that's something that the pro-choice people don't really want to address, because anytime they can discuss about women's rights and they can discuss about all these different things, but when they talk about abortion and what it really does, then they lose.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure.
Sounds like a challenge there. Perhaps, Ms. Smith, would you like to respond to that?
Not particularly. My point here is not to get into a debate about when life begins and what's the difference between having an abortion and killing a live child. That's not the issue for me right now.
Okay.
The issue for me right now is that the Supreme Court has ruled that states can make laws that limit women's right to an abortion, and therefore it's the responsibility of each individual citizen to get out there and make their view known. Each pro-choice individual needs to get out there and register to vote. Make sure that your friends are registered to vote, and if any of your friends are considering running for any level of office, to support them and encourage them to do so.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Then our next caller is from Arden. Go ahead.
Hello. I would like to make the comment that, first of all, I am pro-choice before conception, meaning that I have the right as a woman to make the choice as to whether I'm going to have a child or not by the different methods that are available. And there are quite available. But the main thing is with the young girls, the girls 18, 16 that are becoming pregnant and are having these abortions, the thing is they don't realize is it's a decision that they're making for life, and not only are they endangering themselves by becoming pregnant, but those children are not having a choice as to whether they're going to come into this world or not.
Caller, do you have a specific question?
No, really, I don't have a question. I just have a comment that I really feel like that they need to be educated as to, number one, the things that can be contracted through having sex and becoming pregnant, and that's not being addressed at all. And number two, that they have the choice before and after that choice. Their bodies are not only theirs, they're someone else's inside them.
Certainly an education issue. I don't think you'll find any argument on that. Let's move back to yesterday's decision again from the Supreme Court on the Pennsylvania law. What effects, Ms. Smith, do you think the 24-hour waiting period will have on abortions?
From my perspective, I'm working on my master's degree in social work at the University of South Carolina, and I'm learning more and more how difficult it is for women who are poor, who are disenfranchised, who are also living in outlying areas, to have access to services. And a 24-hour waiting period, I think, would make it even more and more difficult for women who have other obligations, who have families, who have jobs, to be able to have this medical procedure in a safe environment.
All right, I'd like to thank both of our guests today. Again, Bonnie Smith from Now in Greenville and Meredith Hunt for Life Advocates. We appreciate you joining us and sharing your views today. Coming up tomorrow on Talkback, Operation Blood Drive will be in full swing, and Ken Robertson from the American Red Cross will join us to answer your questions about giving the gift of life. Well, with the 4th of July coming up, Hannibal, Missouri is gearing up for National Tom Sawyer Days. That's the town's annual festival of its most celebrated author, Mark Twain. But as travel reporter Ricky Stevenson found out, Hannibal's a great place to visit at any time you have a hankering for life on the Mississippi.
Charges of desecrating human remains in connection with the robbery of graves in Pickens and Anderson counties. News 13's Judy Fleming shows us the evidence ranging from books to body parts.
80 books about Satanism and serial murders, 65 cassette tapes, 24 videotapes on death and dying, a model skull, and the real thing.
They found the skull and hand of Mr. Ballantyne located in a heat air duct.
And this wall safe contained a hand and a baby's bones. Police say the body parts came from 3 grave robberies that date back to March of this year. Police found the evidence inside the home of 24-year-old Jeffrey Dove. Police arrested Dove and his friend, 20-year-old Frankie Hudgens. And near Hudgens' home in Anderson County, police discovered even more clues.
They had a cross here.
The sheriff showed me an altar.
They probably had some kind of rituals here, performed some ceremonies.
Not far from the altar, authorities dug up more body parts. A human skull was found in this hole. Some of the people who live around here told police they suspected something was going on in the woods. They said their pets were disappearing. Police think the animals were used as sacrifices.
It's probably a lesson for the parents. When I look at the boy's bedroom, it's very indicative of somebody dabbling in satanic activity.
Both suspects lived at home with their parents. Police say both probably learned about Satanism from descriptive books and violent music. Judy Fleming, News 13, Pickens County.
Authorities are trying to identify all the human remains. When they've identified the body parts, they will put them back in the grave sites they came from.
Some summer campers got an unexpected lesson in fire safety today on the Blue Ridge Parkway. The activity bus for Camp Illahee in Brevard caught fire near the intersection of 276.
The evaluation process to decide.
18 has just died. Ahmed is 3. His only family is his 12-year-old brother. They too are waiting to die. This is Kansadari, just 200 miles from Mogadishu, but light years from international help. These are the first pictures of the Somalia beyond the reach of the aid agencies. In 6 months, they say, 4,000 men, women and children have starved to death here. Where there was once a prosperous provincial town, the centre of an agricultural region of 50,000, there are now only the ruins left by the fleeing troops loyal to the deposed President Siad Barre. The town's water system was destroyed, hundreds of families made homeless. The aid agencies reckon in this region of central South Somalia, 1.5 million are in immediate danger of dying of hunger. But they cannot land and distribute enough aid even to feed Mogadishu. These people are condemned by a combination of logistics and the gun-toting anarchy of the countryside. Nearer Mogadishu, and the International Red Cross, running its biggest ever relief effort, now lands food aid almost daily. This is Badayo, but where there is food, there are also guns. Last Friday, the warehouse was looted. Thousands of tons of the high-protein meal was stolen to feed the armed and to be sold on the black market. The hope of food, of survival, draws people in from miles around. The weakest die on the way. And the dilemma for the aid agencies is that the more people desert the land for food stations, the less the chance of the area growing food for itself next year. At Gulwain, about 100 miles south of Mogadishu on the coast, the population is swollen by thousands displaced in the fighting and by the scorched earth policy all the factions pursued. This kitchen, run by the French agency Médecins Sans Frontières, can give people only a third of what they need. The port of Merka, only a few miles away, has been closed for the last 5 days by local soldiers complaining they weren't getting enough to eat themselves. They die here at a rate of up to 20 a day. Isaac was the 4th child of this family to die. Weakened by hunger, many are finally defeated by disease or infection. The grave diggers are, they say, the best fed people in town. They get extra rations to give them the strength to do their job. Since the crisis began, they've buried 4,500 people here. But Mogadishu is the greatest magnet for the refugees from the war. The displaced people camps now house at least 300,000. No one can give an exact figure. This child, they said, is better now than he was. These are the most vulnerable people and the hardest to help. For food, those who can trek to the kitchens. There are nearly 200, but everyone who works in them admits they cannot do enough. The International Red Cross runs 90. The woman in charge of them says they don't have enough food, that hundreds are dying, it's getting worse, and everyone knows it's getting worse. There is now a glimmer of hope. Earlier this week, record amounts of grain were unloaded and critically driven out of the port under heavily armed guard across the now divided city. And if some still fell into unofficial hands, it was this time more by accident than by looting. The UN now has observers to monitor the ceasefire, which has held for 4 months. Bureaucracy in Kenya has delayed deployment, and their commander admits he has barely enough men to protect the agencies in Mogadishu itself. But there is optimistic talk of battle fatigue among the warring factions. For this woman, though, it is already too late, and aid workers believe it will be too late for 1 million more unless there's an international effort of unprecedented.
Do you have family, Miss Clay?
Yes, we stayed in our mobile home overnight.
Must have been pretty wild.
It was. Me, my husband, and 3 dogs.
And are you able to stay dry in the trailer when it rains now?
Yes.
Good, thanks very much for talking to us.
Hey, Bob.
Let's see if we can get, yes.
Bob, we've only got about,
yes, go ahead.
We've only got about 30 seconds left. Is that
Sure.
just walk-up traffic? Anybody who walks up there can be served, or need they show some ID, some proof that they're from the area?
No, yes, it's not a problem. I mean, they've got plenty to go around here, so it wouldn't be an issue about somebody trying to freeload off it.
Any shortages at all there, Bob?
Well, as I've been saying earlier in the morning, I mean, shelter is the big problem. I don't think there's anything here that they're extremely short of. They've got water, they've got ice, those are the basics, and enough to, the Red Cross brings the food in, so enough to serve a decent hot lunch and meal, and dinner too.
Okay. Bob Hager, thanks for the mini tour.
Thank you, Brian.
It's 56 past. We're going to come on back. Some final notes for Monday morning after we take a break. This is Today on NBC.
Kids in band have verbal maths. Be more responsive self-discipline for your child. Many of the boys.
Anywhere I want.
You see GM at the gym, hurt your shoes.
For real as a fuck, honey.
GM dancing.
What deal?
GMC, because people need real.
North and 1 mile 25 no. If it's not.
In the sun can be found weekends in the sun. Brian, smoked turkey, or maybe
And back this way, young lady.
Heading back, Brian. I miss you terribly.
I figured as much. That does it for us on this day. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good Monday.
Their baby was taken away by the state because of their religious beliefs.
It breaks my heart to have her in there.
Their struggle with the law. On the next, a closer look.
As in presidential election year, the country votes to beat our politics. Take this for around First Lady 19. Lou Hinton first to be officially addressed as First Lady in 1877.
Speak Edition is going to Rainbow Family's annual bash. Don't miss the party. This is News 4 this hour.
News 4 this hour, sponsored in part by Carolina First.
Aboard a convoy of natives to have our tons of Burkina have been working and shorted by the hurricane 1 hour.
There's a lot of talk these days about family values. But what if your family values send your kids to jail? Should children plus marijuana patients live long? We'll find out why some authorities are saying Mary is just another drug dealer who needs to be weeded out. And it's all next on the Maury Povich Show. Would you consider the place we're about to show you a safe place for children? Let's take a look. Lately, anti-abortion protests are getting.
Back away. I'm standing on the corner.
Back away.
I'm talking around the corner. People are trying to get through. Nobody's trying to get through.
And older and younger. The newest war against abortion is some 7 years old. Many belong to national organizations like Lambs for Christ and Missionaries to the Preborn. Ranks of viewers best save the lives of unborn babies. Recently in Milwaukee, a group of children stormed across the street, stopped traffic, while adult pro-lifers tried to block entrance to an abortion. Parents say they are at their own free will, determined to stop abortion. Critics say they're exploited. They fill out those in need of soap. Now, Rachel McGlade is only 8 years old, yet she has already been arrested 12 times. Joshua Foreman is just 9 years old. He has been arrested 6 times. Our Foreman, 13, she has been arrested 41 times. Imagine that. Now, Rachel, what is it like, Rachel, to get arrested? What happens?
Well, mostly we just crawl and try to get to the doors so we can save babies.
So there's a line of people who are protecting the doors. You're outside the line, and you start crawling, like between legs and things?
Yeah. Sometimes we can't do that because sometimes the people hurt us and stuff.
And you call that a rescue?
Well, we try to, yeah.
So if you get to the door and try to talk to the people, then you consider that a rescue?
The reason we call it a rescue is because women are scheduled to have abortions. Abortion is obviously child. The reason I know that is because if you go to an abortion clinic, dumpsters, you open garbage bags, and you find babies, arms and legs, and that's why I'm out here doing it.
Well,
we call it a rescue, we get them from the wind, block them from going in and murdering their babies.
I'm going to come on, and some other people are going to come on, but I want to find out what it's like to be 8 years old, 9 years old, and outside with all this turbulence going on, all this upheaval, and you're trying to crawl through to get to the doors. And then if you're stopped, what happens, Rachel? What do they do?
Well, sometimes they pick us up and they take us away.
Where do they take you?
Well, they take us to the place, so we call them juveniles.
Right. And they take you to a police station and kind of put you in a juvenile area of the police station. Do they handcuff you?
Sometimes they do.
They do? What's that feel like?
Well, it hurts, but it's nothing like the babies go through. They'd be torn to pieces by limb.
Let's just talk about being arrested, because that, I think, fascinates a lot of us right now. We'll get into the whole question of babies and what happens to them a little later on. What about, for instance, when you get to the police station? What happens? They put you in an area, and then what happens?
We just wait for hours and praying and stuff for the people that are still at the clinic.
And do they finally release you?
Yes.
Do you ever see your parents?
Yeah.
Is that when you see your parents, when they release you? And Joshua, what does it feel like? Are you scared at all?
Well, the first time you rescue, it's kind of scary when you see the police coming at you, and but after a little while, kind of get used to it, you know.
How did you start all this?
Well, when I was like 7 years old, my mom and dad showed me a picture of arms and legs of a little child.
Your mom showed you a picture?
My mom and dad, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Mom, Dad, why are we just sitting here at home when babies are being slaughtered?
Why did they show you the picture?
Well, really, I have actually held I've held a dead baby before.
But what I want to get to is back in the beginning. I mean, did all of you ask your mommy what was all this about, or did they say, we want you to see something, Joshua? We want you to see what we've been doing.
I saw a postcard on the table, and I said, what is that? And she said, well, I'll until you get a little older. And I said, no, Mom, I want to see what's in that postcard. I went and looked at it, and I said, Mom, what is this? And she said, it's a little baby. That's what they do in abortion clinics. And I said, Mom, I want to go out there and try to save him.
You said that to your mom. And the first time, were you scared?
Well, first time when he came at me, it was kind of scary, but if you think for a little while, when you get arrested, it's not even anything compared with the babies, what to go through. Their arms torn.
That's what Rachel said.
You're worried about us being abused and us getting hurt. You're worried about little baby. Mothers have a right to go in and kill them.
Not that we're worried about whether you were abused or not. All we're just bringing up is the fact, and this is the reality. Kids are now involved in this movement. Kids are being arrested. Kids are being put, maybe, in some danger, because it's a very chaotic situation. Laurel, you know you've been arrested 41 times.
Yeah, and I don't like to be arrested, but the babies are being ripped apart, and I'm going to do whatever I can to save them. Man's law it's a law protecting child. I mean, the Nazi Germany, they were Nazis, and the law was that they could be killed, and they go into the death camps, and they get burned and gas, everything. I would have tried to save them.
I don't want to get into that argument. We get to that later. I want to know. I think our audience is wondering why. You're 13 years old, 9 years old, you're 8 years old.
When I was 7 years old, my family would go and pick it at a local hospital, abortion clinic that did abortions. And it was every Sunday we'd go out signs that said abortion kills children and stuff like that. And one day it was raining, and my dad said, "Come on, Laurel, they're killing babies, we got to go out there." I said, "Dad, if they're really killing babies, shouldn't we do more than carry a sign?" And then he helped with Operation Rescue, and now he's a missionary to freeborn.
And Joshua is your little brother.
Mm-hmm.
And you have other brothers and sisters involved?
Just one other brother, 11.
And how many sisters do you have who are involved?
3 brothers.
3 brothers? And your youngest, your 6-year-old brother, has he been out front at these protests?
Yes, he rescued once.
We just saw a picture of Milwaukee.
But the majority of the kids that get arrested are between the ages 13 and 16. I mean, it's these 2 and
they're there.
Like, maybe 5 more most. That's the only reason they're allowed to do stuff is because, you know, we ask them. I go to every smaller kid than me and say.
Do you go to school?
I homeschool.
My
mom teaches me.
And how about you, Joshua? Do you go to school?
No, my mom teaches me at home.
Your mom teaches you. And Rachel?
Same with me.
Huh?
Same with me.
Same with you. Do you miss the fact that you don't go to school and you don't have friends?
No, we have friends. We're involved with activities, football, baseball, soccer, and stuff like that. And we have friends all around the neighborhood and friends in church.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to meet the parents and also a woman who says what these kids have been through, what they describe, is just another form of child abuse after this. Still to come, Marijuana Mary and her volunteer work with AIDS patients that may put her behind bars for the rest of her life.
America, got any plans for dinner?
I feel like chicken tonight, like chicken tonight.
Don't be shy. You want chicken tonight simmer sauces from Ragu? Let us know.
Chicken tonight.
8 great flavors full of real vegetables and herbs, like country French chicken and chicken cacciatore.
I feel like chicken tonight.
Just brown the chicken, simmer, and serve.
Like chicken tonight.
Tonight simmer sauces from Ragu. It's gonna be great tonight.
I feel like chicken tonight.
When you have a corn, the bigger it gets, the smaller your shoe feels. And that can be extremely painful. Fortunate Dr. Scholl's corn removers of painful corn fast. Clinically proven, safe and effective. First, they cushion the pain. Then they dissolve the corn in 5 applications or less. Guaranteed. So buy Dr. Scholl's corn removers and get back into things.
I knew our audience would have a lot of questions and comments on this. What's your reaction, sir?
Well, my reaction is that these children are being taught at home by their parents. They're learning only one side of a story. It's like training an animal. If you train it to be a lion, it'll eat your hand off.
So
if you train it to be a lamb, you'll get a nice warm sweater. It depends on what you tell them.
I just think that everybody has children, instills their value in their children. And I think that these children, obviously, their parents' values, still make decisions. You heard them. They want to do this.
They're not making their own decisions. They're making the decisions that the parents want them to make, that they're leading them into.
But doesn't every parent instill their own values on their child?
You try to, but the child is open to learn every side of the issue, not just the parent's side of the issue that they're learning here.
All right, now just wait a minute. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Laurel.
Okay, first of all, to what my parents have to do, the right. When I go to use, there are both sides there. There's the pro side and the pro-life side. I get the time in the clinics, choice, and I have to decide with them. They tell what they believe, and my parents believe. I made my own decision, and when I made decisions, when I held that.
You've been this group on the front lines since you were 7 years old. That's 6 years now, almost half your life. You have been lines. So for you've kind
on the front lines, I've heard sides of the story. I've been rescues and I've heard the pro-choice side.
Before she came on this line and before she made these...
She's seen it more than probably any of us here have seen it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, Joseph Foreman's 2 children, Laurel, who we've been talking to, and Joshua, who we've been talking to, have been arrested a combined total of 47 times for protesting abortion. Linda McGlade is arrested. Now, Sarah Austin is the executive director of Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Now, out there, you've seen what's happening in Milwaukee, correct?
Yes, I have.
Now, Laura, have you been? Rachel's been in, so you've been with us too. What do you think of the children when you see them out on the front line protest?
Well, I have 2 reactions, I guess. One is a personal reaction, which is pretty much to be horrified that anyone could send their children into harm's way, to see these children running across the street in traffic, to know that they're going to be through the ground. I can't imagine anyone, excuse me, I can't imagine anyone in this audience or watching this program that would decide to have their child spend their summer that way. It's just horrifying. My second reaction is from years of being in charge of Wisconsin's child welfare system, where I've seen child abuse. I had to deal with adoption. I ran the state system.
Do you think this is child abuse?
Well, it's clearly abuse. Exploiting a child for your own agenda.
Linda?
Excuse me, that you think that's child abuse? Well, you're being a hypocrite. Our babies apart in those sports. It's child.
And I think title of the opinion, but when you start to violate rights of other people, and when parents knowingly do being possibly arrested, then I went too far.
Joe Foreman? Woman just says that you're basically abusing your kids.
If what we're talking about is child abuse, what parents for is the largest in the country, and they kill children in the womb. Now, that's the issue.
No, so I'll tell you, that is an issue, but that's not the issue of this show. I wanted to stay away from this so much because I wanted to talk about the issue. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong of having your daughter and your son spend their summers and a lot of the year not only being taught at home, but on the front lines of demonstration where she says, and maybe rightfully so, maybe not, that you are exposing them to harm.
We wouldn't be there if they weren't murdering babies.
Mr. Foreman has been convicted of contributing to the delinquency of a minor with his own children. He has been jailed for that. It is an offense in Wisconsin. He has been jailed for that. People who put their children in this situation, the law is very clear, are contributing to the delinquency of their children, and they're putting them in extreme danger.
All right. We'll be back. Much more to talk about. We'll be back after this.
And were accepted by funeral directors all over the world.
If you're between the ages of 40 and 80, you can get free information about the Peace of Mind program. You owe it to yourself and to those you love. To get your free information, just call the toll-free number on your...
My new partial fit.
Now, back to the point here. There was that you are abusing your children. Linda?
Okay, I have a job to do as a parent. I have a job to train my children up to know the truth, to walk in the truth, and not to believe a lie. I have to answer before my God someday on how I train up my husband have been in for 3 years. We don't send our children to the front lines without being there ourselves. I have a charge. I have a charge against me right now. I may be arrested when I get home for passing out Christian literature. My husband just spent 15 days in jail. We do not send our children out. But the fact of the matter is, the truth is coming out. It's like the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, where the boy shouted out and said, he doesn't have any clothes on. The kids are saying, it's a baby.
Do you ever say to yourself,
it's
my gosh, maybe I shouldn't be putting Rachel out there?
Of course I have. In the beginning, I agonized. I prayed. I said, Lord, what are we to do? But I want my children. They know the truth. They've seen the truth. And they want to do all they can to save these children. And I can't hold them back. I'm not going to force them to do it.
What about others get involved, like pamphlets, writing to their congressman? Yes. Don't send them out there. She's too young. She's only 8 years old. What age we might as well 4 or 5. You know, let them title out there needs to get.
Okay, stuff works, but
sure it does.
Yeah, it does. But they're not there. We're on our own consciences and what we believe as a person.
I understand.
Well, wait a second. I hear that. The audience is basically saying that you're what? Programmed? Brainwashed? the words brainwash come, Joe, that's what they think.
You want me to respond to it?
Well, I would hope. If it's arms and legs and bloody.
Okay, you said it, so I won't say it, but I will say this. They look at it and they say, that's a human being, we need to stop it. Just hear me out. You all look at that and say, it was right, it's a this, it's a that. Who's brainwashed?
Why should these children have to be looking at these? They should be enjoying their young years, you know?
You know, we're out there because those children being aborted are never going to have that chance. We're out there because we want more of our friends to be able to have that chance.
Why can't you children go to school and write essays and write reports and talk in front of the school, you know, in front of your classroom, discussions about what you believe to a point, but have a normal life?
What's wrong with them having school at home?
Well, you're not like all the other children. You're not part of the educational system. You're not learning how to deal with everyday issues, and you're learning from your parents and what they teach you and what they believe. You're not learning education. We have teachers to teach you different things. You're learning what they want you to learn.
Through 5th grade.
Until the 5th grade?
Uh-huh.
And you're now 13, so you would be in what, 8th grade now?
I'm going into 9th.
You would be going in the 9th grade. You're going in the 9th grade, but you're going in at home.
And also, aren't you missing out on a lot of things, proms and parties and everything? You're dedicating your life to what your parents believe.
I'm dedicated
but what you didn't talk about this from the beginning, and all of the friends of yours probably don't even know this, probably have never seen this, probably don't even talk about it.
Yes.
I think these parents are fanatics, and if it wasn't this subject, it would just be another subject. I just think it's unbelievable. But if it wasn't this issue, it would just be some issue instead.
Let's talk about it. Let's go back. Let's say that you and I are parents at 1958. There's segregation throughout the country, and we are passionate about breaking down the barriers of segregation. And we have 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. Are you going to tell me that we're not going to impart our views, our experiences to our kids and get them involved in what we consider to be a great movement to integrate this country?
It's a delicate subject. I can't say what I'd do in that situation, but I would hope that I would not expose my children to danger.
Could I comment on that, Lauren? I think the fundamental difference is that we are seeing children being sent in this situation, first to violence of others, and secondly to break the law. If any other situation arose where parents were saying, go steal something, go break somewhere, we would say that's horrible. They're sending their children in to break the law. I was around for years and have felt passionately about those things, and children were indeed involved, but they were demonstrated lawfully, and I have no problem when these folks come and picket our clinics, do informational picketing.
You have no problem with that?
Absolutely no problem. That's legal. Up and down, marching up and down, no problem. Jump on the back of a pregnant woman, when they scream at her, when they put glue in our doors, they break the law, and they send their children in to break the law.
I wanted to concentrate, believe it or not, on this topic about the children. And Linda, you wanted to say something, and maybe
Well, I want to say a lot of things, but what I'm thinking of, you've never been to a rescue, you don't know what a rescue is like. We crawl up to the doors, we crawl with our families. We do the civil rights movement, people got arrested in the civil rights movement, children got arrested in the civil rights movement. Today we don't have, you people have more rights, the blacks have more rights. These babies need somebody to stand up for them, and we're there to stand up for them. The issue is not of human rights, women's rights, it's of children's rights issues, and these children are standing up for human babies that are allowed to be killed up to 9 months in the womb in this country.
All right, one more comment.
I think these people have to be commended. I think when you have the only way change going to come about is if you make it happen, like in the civil rights movement.
You don't mind the children up there?
I happen to be a pro-life person. I wouldn't go to the extreme, and I do have exceptions. Incest, rape, there are some health of the mother.
I'm talking about these kids. Nothing wrong with using these kids.
I wouldn't put them in harm's way. If there were some way to protect them, they have a passionate belief. I commend them for standing up for what they believe in.
What if the children didn't want to do this anymore? What would the parents' ideas on that be?
How about that?
Okay.
Huh? Great? Do you think one day, Laurel, or not?
What?
Do you think you would change your mind about what you believe one day or not?
No, I won't. Could I?
The question is, could you? Would you? Would you? Wait a second.
Well, when I was 11 and 12, I was involved with the Right to Life movement. I was in Catholic school, and it's what my parents believed, and it's what the nuns and the teachers taught me. And so I went to the marches on Washington, the march, and Now I'm 26 and I work for a family planning organization, and it's because I was exposed to different thoughts, and I believe in the sincerity of these children, but I don't believe that my own opinion at 12 wasn't well formed, you know, and I was out there, and I believe in their sincerity, but I just don't believe that you can have well-informed opinion at the age of 12.
I think maybe as we close, that one thing we were able to do is try to keep the focus of this subject on the question of these young people being out there all the time. I think we've done a fairly good job of that. So I thank all of you for that. As to your beliefs on this subject, who is going to ever settle that at a forum like this? This is one of the great debates of the country, and it will continue. So I thank you all very much for joining us. We'll be back after this.
Abortion issue off the back burner. Good evening, I'm Jonathan Sari, sitting in for Michael Cogdill. We'll have a look at that story in a moment, but first, our top story. The weekend has been particularly dangerous on area roads. First, we take you to Asheville, where authorities are investigating
roads. You'd see the so-called life chain, made up of church members holding signs in the pouring rain. A scene organizers hoped you'd see in cities across the USA, with 1 million people expected to take
abortion issue off the back burner. Good evening, I'm Jonathan Sari, sitting in for Michael Cogdill. We'll have a look at that story in a moment, but first, our top story. The weekend has been particularly dangerous on area roads. First, we take you to Asheville, where authorities are investigating
roads. You'd see the so-called life chain, made up of church members holding signs in the pouring rain. A scene organizers hoped you'd see in cities across the USA, with 1 million people expected to take part.
Life begins at conception, and that when abortion is committed, a life has been taken, that it's murder. And there's just no way, even, that nobody should have the choice to kill.
But on Pelham Road, not far from the life chain, sympathizers with the National Organization for Women also braved the weather with their message.
They are a small, fundamentalist group of people who want to force their form of religion on the majority of society. And we want people to know that they're not the majority and they're not the only voice in South Carolina.
I think that if you don't care now, you're not going to care later, that you need to set your goals and your morals now.
And certainly both sides have, as case after case goes before the Supreme Court to determine the constitutionality, legality, and morality of abortion.
In fact, the Supreme
performed. Both sides hope the justices will take notice of the people's choice, or rather, the people's choices. Teresa Dickey, News 4, Greenville.
Elsewhere around the country, about 30,000 anti-abortionists marched in Boston today to raise money for low-income pregnant women. The demonstrators marched on the Boston Commons. Their theme is Respect Life. Some of the money raised from the march will go toward anti-abortion programs. Other funds will buy food and clothing for statewide agencies that help pregnant women. Well, a new poll out today shows the economy...
Demonstrators across the country informing life chains along busy roads. In Waynesville, hundreds of people lined the major route leading into downtown. They held up anti-abortion signs, hoping to catch the attention of passing motorists. There are no abortion clinics in Haywood County, and these people want to keep it that way. They also want to send a message to the U.S. Supreme Court, which begins another session tomorrow. The justices have refused to overturn Roe versus Wade, the case that legalized abortion.
I think that the Supreme Court has a long ways to go, and that I would say within the next year or two that they'll get there.
Today, anti-abortion protesters lined up along roads in 9 South Carolina cities, including Greenville, Spartanburg, and Greenwood. Several hundred people turned out
for Greenville Street Sunday, while just a few blocks away, the National Organization for Women was out in force to advocate its pro-choice stand.
Okay, time now to go to Washington, where Ted Koppel is preparing tonight's Nightline. Ted?
Hugh, tonight we have a Nightline investigation into a potential foreign policy nightmare. President Bush is leaving office after signing a sweeping nuclear treaty with Russia. But is the world a less dangerous place. Hugh?
That's Nightline after your local news. And that's 2020 for tonight. We thank you for being with us.
And remember, we're in touch, so you be in touch. I'm Barbara Walters.
And I'm Hugh Downs.
And for all of us here at 2020, we wish you a good weekend and good night.
Sunday on This Week with David Brinkley, the FBI director answers misconduct charges, plus a shaky start for the Clinton White House, the president's spokesman, and others on Zoe Baird's withdrawal. Sunday.
2020 is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
This is ABC.
When I hear the rain, I know I'm in for it. The dampness, the chill. Arthritis pain seems to come from every joint in my body. For pain like this, now instead of aspirin, I take Advil. Advil contains the same medicine my doctor often prescribes for arthritis pain. In fact, for minor arthritis pain, doctors recommend Advil most. With Advil, I'm on my way. Advil, tablets and caplets. Advanced medicine for pain.
It was great!
Fantastic! WLOS and WAXA and the Peace Center present World Cup Figure Skating Champions. In person, 12 Olympic, world, and national champions in one of the greatest ice shows ever. See Olympic champions Victor Petrenko, Elizabeth Manley, and ice dance with Marina Klimova and Sergei Ponomarenko. World Cup Figure Skating Champions presented by WLOS, WAXA, and the Peace Center in Greenville, South Carolina. Tickets start at $12. Call the numbers on your screen.
Yeah. Okay, start with this. Add $211 for the price increase, $686 for air conditioning, $239 for aluminum wheels, $595 for anti-lock brakes, and $257 for power door locks.
Ouch.
Okay, now Lumina. Start with this.
Price increase?
No, they held the line on price.
Air?
Standard.
Aluminum wheels?
Standard.
ABS?
Standard.
How about roadside assistance?
Standard. Now, what have you got?
A great value.
That's why I bought a Chevy Lumina from my Southern Chevy Geo dealer.
You're watching the Carolinas ABC station. This is News 13 Nightcast with the latest local news, weather, and sports.
Good evening, everyone. President Bill Clinton has chosen the 20th anniversary of the landmark Roe v. Wade decision on abortion to make good on a campaign promise. Today, he lifted restrictions on abortion imposed since 1988 by his Republican predecessors. Mr. Clinton announced it was time to free science and medicine from the grasp of politics. He lifted the gag order banning abortion counseling at federally funded clinics, and he did away with the moratorium on federal funding for research involving transplantation of fetal tissue.
The evidence is overwhelming. The moratorium has dramatically limited the development of possible treatment for millions of individuals who suffer from serious disorders, including Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and leukemia. We must let medicine and science proceed unencumbered by anti-abortion politics.
The president also lifted the ban on abortions at military hospitals, and he has called for a review of the ban on the private importation of the French abortion pill RU-486. Tonight, medical researchers and abortion activists are praising his decisions.
In Asheville, both sides of the abortion issue commemorated the anniversary of the Roe decision in their own ways. Pro-choice advocates are celebrating but aren't satisfied, while anti-abortion activists have lost an ally in the White House but not their hope. News 13's Eric Earnhardt has more.
That today, President Clinton, by executive order, overturned the gag rule so that now all medical personnel...
Reaction to the news was instant and ecstatic as pro-choice advocates celebrated an administration on their side. But the joy was tempered by a warning to remain vigilant.
Lest we ever forget the dark days before Roe, when abortion was a crime, when women and girls faced with unwanted pregnancies, out of desperation, subjected themselves to the butchers of back alleys.
But while the Roe v. Wade decision may be safe under the Clinton administration, pro-choice advocates say access to abortion is still in jeopardy.
People that say they're primarily pro-choice are still allowing the states to pass very, very restrictive statutes. And this is one thing we need to realize, that the anti-choice group may be a small minority, but they are much more vocal than we have been, and they're getting their laws passed.
But they were not vocal tonight. anti-abortion advocates held a private memorial service for children lost through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth.
It's more realistic that we're not going to change the law until we change people's hearts. And what we're trying to do tonight with the memorial service is really just stop arguing and just act on our belief that abortion takes the life of an unborn child. And when we do that with courage, we're going to make progress.
Eric Earnhardt, News 13 Nightcast.
In Washington, both anti-abortion and pro-choice activists took to the streets. Those who oppose abortion marched from the White House to the Supreme Court, criticizing President Clinton's stand on abortion and vowing to continue to fight for what they believe is right. And they got support from North Carolina's senior senator.
In the name of choice, he has promised that his advocacy of abortion will be the initial defining act of his administration. And I say to him, shame, shame. And on this issue, we must oppose him every step of the way.
Abortion rights activists countered with a march of their own, celebrating their political victory.
For the first time in 12 years, we have a pro-choice president, one who has made specific campaign promises on this issue.
Democrats in Congress promised to push for a bill that would guarantee a woman's right to abortion. President Clinton had the first setback of his presidency today. We'll have more in a minute, but first, let's check in with Gary Stevenson for Top of the Weather. Gary?
Is Rutherford County in the running for a big auto plant?
Please don't hurt me.
Love one another. Work it out.
Is it so hard?
Believe in yourself.
Next on News 13, local pro-choice and anti-abortion groups talk about how the murder at a Florida abortion clinic affects their causes.
Agents investigate a second Carolina business to see if it sold guns or ammo to a cult in Waco. And blood donors who have to roll up both sleeves.
And it looks like a winter storm watch.
C Station. This is News 13 at 6 with the latest local news, weather, and sports.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
Well, today some abortion providers are working in fear while abortion protesters support. That's the reaction from both sides of the abortion controversy to the shooting death of abortion doctor David Gunn. Gunn died after he was shot in the chest repeatedly outside his Pensacola, Florida clinic. Police arrested abortion protester Michael Griffin and charged him with murder. Today, Griffin told a judge he wants to use the Bible as a legal document and plans to defend himself. News 13's Cheryl Barber tells us how the shooting could change abortion protests in our area.
A blood-stained gun lying in the grass, police markers around an abortion clinic, all shocking images that change how people look at these protests. Many protesters have long feared violence during pro-life protests at clinics. Now the act of one gunman has brought those fears home.
One concern that I have is that pastors and other people who believe that abortion kills an unborn child are now going to say that they don't want to go down and offer help to women at the last minute at the abortion clinics because they're going to be afraid of being associated with somebody, some isolated person like this fellow in Florida that will kill somebody.
It's certainly going to make me more wary and more nervous if something like that occurs. When you actually hear about something like that happen, it brings it much closer to home.
Susan Park says she knows many local abortion clinic protesters and believes they are committed to peaceful demonstrations. She's outraged at statements from a national anti-abortion group's leader.
We regret the incident and the loss of a life. We do realize that there will be maybe a dozen babies saved today as a result of this episode.
Here are these people that term themselves pro-life that are now saying we must focus on the lives of the unborn children and realize that this man would have killed a dozen children by the end of the day, as if somehow the death of this man on the doorstep of his office is justified.
But pro-life activists say the Florida tragedy will not stop their protests.
I think the best response is to reach out with compassion and with care, and also to place ourselves in the way, at the door, peacefully, to say that in order for you to kill your child, you're going to have to walk over me.
Cheryl Barber, News 13, Asheville.
Pro-choice advocates say they will hold a memorial service for Dr. Gunn at Trinity Episcopal Church at noon tomorrow in Asheville.
There are unconfirmed reports tonight that another German car manufacturer
shot yesterday outside his abortion clinic in Pensacola, Florida. President Clinton said today he is outraged. Several women's organizations said that given the increasing ugly nature of anti-abortion protest, it was shocking, but not surprising. First from Pensacola, ABC's Mark Potter.
A single bouquet marks the site where Dr. David Gunn was shot. The Women's Medical Services office is closed now for the rest of the week. The only other abortion clinic in Pensacola is referring its clients to doctors in other cities because Dr. Gunn was the only physician who performed abortions in these clinics.
He was a wonderful human being. He cared about everyone, cared about women's rights, and he cared about women.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Are you Michael Griffin? Yes, sir.
The murder suspect, Michael Griffin, a chemical plant worker, appeared in court today via television hookup from jail and asked if he could handle his own defense.
I would like to keep my Bible as one of my legal documents.
Griffin had turned himself in yesterday to a Pensacola police sergeant.
Initially, he told me that a person had been shot behind the building. And then I asked him again, he told me that he had shot a man behind the building.
Leaders of the movement Griffin belonged to say they don't condone the killing, but explained why they are collecting money for Griffin's family.
I believe that the pro-death people will take care of Dr. Gunn's family, and as Christians, we're going to reach out to the Griffins, not run away from them, because they're in bad trouble.
They also say that at least some good could come from Dr. Gunn's death.
If this measure somehow stops other doctors from performing abortion, we cannot take back the tragedy that happened yesterday. We might as well reap some of the good things that come from it.
And those would be?
And those would be maybe less abortionists, less babies dying.
But anti-abortion groups are putting some distance between themselves and Michael Griffin. His wife had accused him of violence during a family dispute. Police say they don't expect any more arrests, but are still investigating. Mark Potter, ABC News, Pensacola, Florida.
Dr. Gunn was divorced. He had 2 children, a 22-year-old son and a daughter who was 17. As we said, President Clinton is outraged by the killing. We must create a climate, he said, where people do not believe this kind of behavior is acceptable. As abortion rights supporters see it, that is the problem. Violence, they say, is the rule, not the exception. Here's ABC's Karen Burns.
It is, say abortion rights supporters, their worst nightmare come true. They see the murder of Dr. David Gunn as the culmination of years of violence by anti-abortion forces.
Around the country, abortion providers and abortion clinics are on red alert.
Between 1991 and 1992, incidents of violence and disruption increased by 96%. Since January of this year, at clinics across the country, there have been outbreaks of arson, 9 chemical attacks, 2 attempted bombings, even a machine gun attack. There have been numerous death threats and physical assaults on clinic personnel. That has all been having an impact. Fewer and fewer doctors are willing to perform abortions.
I've had 2 physicians call me today asking me where they can buy bulletproof vests. I've had another physician talk to me about how he has gone down to his local gun store and purchased 2 weapons.
The question of how to protect abortion clinics has been hotly debated. Local law enforcement says they can only do so much, and federal officials say they're limited by a recent Supreme Court ruling saying demonstrations are protected by freedom of speech. But today, members of Congress and abortion rights activists demanded that the federal government treat attacks on abortion clinics as serious crimes. One group opposed to abortion issued a statement today strongly condemning any violence in the fight against abortion. But abortion...
That realization that your cold is really the flu, and all you can do now is take Theraflu. Hot relief from your miserable symptoms. Maximum strength Theraflu in nighttime or new daytime non-drowsy. It's tougher than the toughest flu.
Coming up tonight at 11 on News 13 Nightcast.
Will a new Supreme Court ruling silence abortion protesters in the Carolinas? Some folks collect pictures, but outhouses? And Bad Boy Bart creates problems for one Carolina school district.
Good evening, America. I'm Joan London. Is laughter really the best medicine? Tomorrow, circus clowns who think clown care can help cure what ails you. Also, a preview of the President's State of the Union address and actress Tracy Gold's battle against anorexia tomorrow on Good Morning America.
Broadcasting Company, ABC.
Where's the remote?
It's my turn.
Huh?
During Hardee's Daily Double Values, get any 2 double cheeseburgers for just $2. What a deal.
Okay, you done?
Regular double cheeseburger, new grilled onion, or new barbecue double cheeseburger. 2 for $2. Mmm, barbecue.
I gotta have that.
Hurry to Hardee's. Get any 2 double cheeseburgers, just $2. Now for a limited time.
Hey, what's it gonna take?
Just $2. And now for breakfast, 2 Hardee's mouth-watering sausage and egg biscuits. Just $2. Hardee's.
Amanda Hodson thought it would be impossible to match that special blue her daughter wanted. But then she found out about one and only paint from Lowe's. Found out Lowe's custom-match paint computer could match any color. Even her daughter's prized stuffed dolphin. Plus, she got Lowe's 15-year guarantee and low prices. And if she ever has to match her color again, she can just bring in her new blue jeans. Lowe's, helping add value to the homes on Raymond Street and your street.
The Old El Paso Challenge. We asked these Southwestern salsa experts.
I've been making my own salsa for 16 years now. We know our salsas.
To taste new home-style salsa from Old El Paso.
This is very much like the salsa that I make at home.
They used fresh ingredients. It says fresh green bell peppers,
fresh onions,
fresh jalapeno, and fresh cilantro.
That's more fresh ingredients than anyone else.
Might pass it off as something I made.
Try new home-style salsa from Old El Paso.
You can taste how fresh it is. It tastes homemade.
You're watching 13 WLOS TV.
They block abortion clinics with their bodies to fight for what they believe in. But are they racketeers? The Supreme Court issues a controversial ruling on abortion protesters.
Was Tanya Harding in on the Nancy Kerrigan attack? Published reports say she knew all about it, and the DA is closing in. Some people will collect just about anything: stamps, cards, autographs. But would you believe that somebody actually collects outhouses?
And now, News 13 Nightcast.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Abortion rights supporters are celebrating and anti-abortion forces are mourning a Supreme Court decision today.
The ruling leaves abortion protesters open to long prison terms and huge fines under a federal anti-racketeering law designed to stop organized crime. The law, known as RICO, means abortion clinics can sue anti-abortion protesters and recover up to 3 times as much in damages than were actually caused. Opponents say this violates their freedom of speech.
Will be afraid to let us have rallies. People will be afraid to come out to our events lest they be part of this broad conspiracy.
It hurts them. It
There's no better weapon than to get at the financial base of an organization.
The RICO laws can put protesters behind bars for up to 20 years if they use violence or threats at a demonstration. Now, locally, the reaction is split along those same political lines. Nightcast reporter Suzanne Hudson talked with people on both sides of the fence today. Suzanne, what did they have to say?
Well, folks had to say, especially the abortion rights people who are for abortion rights, they say that this is the leverage that they have been needing to keep the opponents off the front steps of their clinics. But those who want to stop abortions altogether in the Carolinas and in the U.S., well, they're afraid some of their more passionate members might go beyond the law.
There's no way that this movement to protect life is going to be suppressed. Some people are probably going to end up going to jail for long periods of time. Some people will go underground, and there may be an increase in bombings, an increase of violence, the things that most people are very, very worried about.
Meredith Hunt knows what he's talking about. As what he calls a peaceful demonstrator, he's been arrested trying to change people's minds outside abortion clinics. Asheville has had its share of noisy anti-abortion protests and some quiet ones. But Hunt says laws meant to stop drug dealers and mafia hitmen shouldn't be used against him.
We're not talking about terrorist activities. We're talking about people who believe that it is permitted by their conscience and by our own laws to break a minor law like trespass to save a human life.
And that's exactly why the abortion rights people say this statute is desperately needed. Citizens for Choice say obviously jail time won't keep the protesters away from the women, so the next best thing is to hit them in the wallet.
Money is a big issue, and if an organization is crippled financially, that means they're able to be less effective.
But even better than a federal law, she says, are city laws, simple ones that keep the picketers away from those being picketed.
I think if we locally just had a good picketing ordinance and we had appropriate police protection, I think we're probably all right.
It was just last year alone that 8 abortion clinics were torched and 1 was actually bombed. Abortion rights activists hope that this law is going to stop some of the crimes like that.
Do local supporters plan to use this law?
They say they really haven't had the opportunity to use them because, in all honesty, most all of the protests have been peaceful. But they say if it ever does go to the point where folks are camped out on those front steps, then they are absolutely going to go to court.
We'll find out when it happens. Thanks, Suzanne. Well, national figure skating champion Tonya Harding issued another statement today denying all allegations that she had any role in the assault on rival Nancy Kerrigan. Harding was back on the ice training today while a Portland, Oregon grand jury continued to hear testimony. Law enforcement sources say they have enough evidence to convict her, but there's no indication when the grand jury will return indictments. Residents of the working class communities where Harding grew up continue to line the ice to show support, and her fan club is collecting petitions to keep her on the U.S. Olympic team.
There is no way in heaven or hell that she could have skated and practiced the way she did in Detroit with any smidgen of guilt.
Today, the Oregonian newspaper reported that police are waiting to charge Harding until they're sure their case is watertight. A Buncombe County man pleaded guilty to second-degree murder today in the beating death of his girlfriend last summer. 23-year-old Michael Rogers was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Rita Eastridge last June. Rogers could get life in prison. He'll be sentenced next month.
Testimony continues tomorrow in the sexual abuse case against a Saluda man. Prosecutors say 38-year-old Michael Parker sexually abused 3 children that are related to him. All 3 have testified against him in the trial, including a 12-year-old girl who took the stand today. On cross-examination, she stuck to her claim that Parker abused her in a Saluda trailer and again in a wooded area. She testified other adults wearing ceremonial robes watched that alleged incident. Parker is charged with a dozen sexual offenses. If convicted, he could get life in prison. When that trial resumes tomorrow, it'll be under tighter security because of a bomb scare at the courthouse today. A maintenance worker found a package outside a courthouse door this morning. It was addressed to Superior Court Judge Zaro Geis. The worker called deputies. They took the package, evacuated the courthouse, and sealed off the area around it. After that, they took the package to Jackson Park. Experts say it wasn't a bomb, just made to look like one. The bomb scare delayed court for half a day.
Now, a second bomb scare in Hendersonville closed the Blue Ridge Mall for about 2 hours today. Just before noon, a woman called in a bomb threat to the mall office. Police say after the same woman made a second call, they decided to evacuate and close the mall. Police, firefighters, and a bomb-sniffing dog conducted a store-by-store search, but found no sign of a bomb. Police believe a copycat made the threats after hearing about the bomb scare.
Profile with a $10 million ad campaign. In the Carolinas, News 13's Linda Dawson tells us one area chapter is also making a move to become more visible.
The Asheville chapter of Planned Parenthood held its annual luncheon today. Speakers offered support for the family planning goals of the organization. But one of the big items announced concerned a change of address. This week, Planned Parenthood will be moving to this bigger and more visible location on Biltmore Avenue. Officials from the parent office in Charlotte inspected the new offices. Planned Parenthood staff members say for too long, they stayed in the background when it comes to women's health services.
We provide a very real service, and I think we've been allowing ourselves to be too worried about the negative value of some people's perception of us and not concentrating on the fact that actually the services we provide are positive services.
Clients such as social worker Dawn Wright are positive Planned Parenthood is a good choice for women needing reproductive health care.
First of all, it's less expensive. Second of all, they are just the nicest people in the world. You call to make an appointment, they get you in. They really care about you.
Right now, the clinic serves about 2,500, and the new location means it'll be able to take on more clients looking for low-cost care. Linda Dawson, News 13.
Planned Parenthood officials say they're accused of being pro-abortion, but say they're really pro-choice with an emphasis on family planning. But a local anti-abortion group disagrees with that statement. Members of Life Advocates picketed outside First.
Too hot to wear all this stuff.
Is the issue of taking care of yourself and being responsible and not putting yourself in a position where suddenly you have to make painful decisions.
The services Planned Parenthood offers includes gynecological checkups, birth control products, and crisis counseling. While Planned Parenthood and its supporters met inside, members of Life Advocates picketed outside. The group says the point of today's protest was to object to Planned Parenthood's support of Medicaid funding for some abortions and its support of funding for abortions in health care reform. Planned Parenthood officials say they're accused of being pro-abortion, but they say they're really pro-choice with an emphasis on family planning.
There are reports from Washington tonight that prosecutors are close to reaching a...
If you've been sniffling and sneezing, you're not alone. Everyone's allergies are in full swing this time of year. Coming up later, we'll have details on how you can fight back.
I'm Sterling Benson. Dozens of people have died in England from a deadly strep virus that eats away at your skin. We'll have that story.
When my doctor wrote my prescription, I forgot to tell him I was taking thyroid medicine. At home, I looked at the patient advisory leaflet Revco gave me. It said the new medication can't be taken with my thyroid medicine. So I called my doctor and he put me on something else. What a relief.
The more you know, the better you'll feel. So shop at the only drugstore that gives you low prices in this with each prescription. Revco.
And thanks to Revco.
All car dealers are not the same. George Coleman Ford has been honored for its distinguished achievement for quality. Here's why.
They have many vehicles inside, so you don't have to look at the features in the cold.
The staff was courteous, polite, and helpful. They have a good variety of cars. The showroom is inside and promotes a warm atmosphere.
Service, an important ingredient why Jake and I say at George Coleman Ford you can have your cake and eat it too.
You don't have to travel far to have fun this summer. News 4 takes you to the little-known hotspots right in your own backyard. Carolina Getaways, Wednesday at 6 on News 4, Carolina's news channel.
The Children's Miracle Network Telethon, 9 p.m. Saturday on Your Friend 4.
This is Your Friend 4, WYFM. Now, live from Carolina's news channel, this is News 4 at 5:30.
Abortion foes aren't allowed to block entrances to abortion clinics or attack people entering those clinics. Good evening, I'm Sterling Benson.
And I'm Carl Clark. More on that story in a moment. First, our top story tonight is News 4 has told you a $50 million sports arena is planned for downtown Greenville. It'll be built through a public-private partnership, which means your property taxes won't increase to pay for it. It's a financial plan used in Phoenix, Arizona to build the America West Arena. Our Liz Walker joins us live now to show us some of the things you may see in the Greenville Arena. Liz?
Well, we don't know exactly what you'll see at the Greenville Arena, but Carl Scheer, the man who's basically driving this project, has mentioned a few things that he would like to see put in the arena when it is built. To name a few, he wants a food court. He also wants a full-service restaurant. Well, the America West Arena here in Phoenix has all that and a whole lot more. Let's go on a tour with a little bit of help with the marketing director here and see some of the highlights.
Well, here in our food court, this is the public area. We have 5 different restaurant concepts, and this is a very popular area during the games. You'll find this area just flooded with people.
So this is pretty unique.
This is very unique. But all of the new buildings that have a team as a major tenant always typically have team shop. This team shop on a game night, we have to have a line. We have to have a line outside and only allow a certain amount of people in. We can go from basketball one night, then next night go to football, and then the next night go to a concert. This is the restaurant portion of the Copper Club, and it's open on event nights. For Suns games, it's again club seat holders and suite holders, and it's always booked up. It's a very, very popular product.
Well, speaking of the suites, they sell for anywhere from $60,000 to $70,000 a year. Now, this is just one way to help pay for the arena, and they plan to do the same thing in Greenville, but at this point, we don't know exactly how much those suites will sell for. Sterling, Carl?
Liz, Phoenix, Arizona is a much bigger city than Greenville, South Carolina. It has major league teams and many more people. Is it fair to compare the two arenas in the two cities?
Well, it's not really a case of comparing them. It's just a case of taking a look at some of the things that they have and possibly things that we might have. The arena here was a $90 million project. The arena there will be $50 million. So whatever we have will more than likely be a lot lower on the scale. But certainly it'll have quality, but just not as huge.
But certainly a fair comparison, too. Thanks, Liz. The arena could turn into an unexpected source of revenue for local business owners. Howard Waddell has plans to turn his office parking lot at East, North, and Lavinia into a profit center.
If people come in here and want us to lease our space, we'll lease it to them, $2 or $3 a space for a show, and we'll be glad to take the money. I mean, we'd like to have it.
Waddell has a total of 40 parking spaces he says are just going to waste at nighttime right now. The city has more formal plans for handling the huge traffic flow the arena will create, and Gabrielle Gurl will have details on that at 6.
A 15-year-old has pleaded guilty to the shooting death of another teenager in Cleveland Park earlier this year. The teen will go to juvenile detention in Columbia until his 21st birthday. The victim's mother, Betty Clark, painfully sat through the hearing in which the teenager pleaded guilty today. Her son, Eddie Keith Clark, was shot with an AK-47 assault rifle in Cleveland Park in February. He died from his wounds last month. A new law signed by President Clinton today makes it a federal crime to block abortion clinics. But pro-life activists in Asheville say they're not retreating. Let's go live now to News 4 St. Brian in our Asheville newsroom with more. St.
Well, Sterling, President Clinton says the new law is a necessary response to respond to the rising tide of lawlessness among anti-abortion protesters, including, as we'll remember, the fatal shooting of a Florida doctor. Now, the first time a protester tries to block an abortion clinic access, he could be fined up to $100,000 and a year in prison. And even non-violent offenders could face up to 6 months in prison and fines up to $10,000. As the leader of a group called Life Advocates, Meredith Hunt and his sidewalk counselors have brought the national abortion debate to the streets of Asheville. Almost every day, they hand out leaflets and carry signs outside clinics. Hunt says this new law will scare away some of his nonviolent protesters, people intimidated by the threat of prison sentences and heavy fines. But he is not retreating.
This FACE bill sometime could be applied to us. And so we operate under that threat. And it may come to the day where we may have the abortion clinics patrolled by federal marshals. And that'll be an unusual sight to have federal marshals down there like they did in Wichita, patrolling up and down the sidewalks.
All this is just in an attempt to keep the clinics from being blockaded, and hopefully an attempt to keep people who work in abortion clinics from being threatened, harassed, followed, and in cases shot and murdered.
That's Spike Graham from the local Citizens for Choice group. She goes on to say that the new law does not violate any of the First Amendment rights, freedom to assembly, freedom to speech, because it does allow peaceful protest and prayer vigils.
Now, Saint, what do the pro-life groups say to that?
Well, there are two national pro-life groups that have already filed suits. Basically, they disagree, and they are seeking a court order to try to block enforcement of the new law. They say it is preventing them from freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, the whole thing.
Okay, thanks for that report, St. Brian, from our Asheville newsroom.
In national and international news tonight, a routine landing for a passenger jet after the pilot dies. The British Airways plane landed safely in Tokyo.
His poker club. His excitement evaporated when he was informed by...
Mr. Harmon, could we have a shorter pour, please?
Ready with the beer. Go!
Can I order a pint or a bucket? That was special effects. Don't go on at me.
Look, I've got to go to the little girl's room. No.
Nobody's going anywhere until we've done all this again. It's not good enough.
What do you mean, dirty? Death camps in Siberia. Russia's greatest living writer landed first in Magadan, a center of the Gulag where he once was a prisoner. It was an emotional homecoming. I bow before the land, Solzhenitsyn said, which holds within it many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of our executed countrymen. He has come home, he said, to help with the future healing of Russia, where he says the atmosphere remains heavily stained with communism. The writer plans to travel across Russia to Moscow, where he will live. He wants to see for himself the changes since he left, back when Brezhnev still ruled. A stern moralist, Solzhenitsyn will not like what he sees. At Harvard University in 1978, he condemned what he called the excessive freedom in the West that has led to crime, pornography, and degradation of the human spirit. He shunned most contact with Western culture during his long exile because he did not want to be tainted by it. But he will find the same problems in Russia now, too. Solzhenitsyn has said he wants to stay out of politics, but it may not be easy. Nationalists and others hope to capitalize on his presence here and his Russian nationalist views. Many Russians, though, while pleased he's back, wish he'd come home several years ago, when his return would have made more of an impact. David Ensor, ABC News, Moscow.
A new sanctuary for whales. The International Whaling Commission declared the protection zone.
We'll have the latest on that, plus a look at security in local clinics. This weekend we'll say so...
No more! No more!
At only $33.90 a month.
I seen he was right behind me. He had a shotgun. I jumped over the wall. He was shooting everybody.
Gunshots ring out at 2 Boston abortion clinics. We'll have the latest on that, plus a look at security precautions at local clinics. Asheville police arrest 2 people suspected of a series of break-ins that have plagued an area neighborhood. Plus, Carolina football players take time out from their... Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Pompilio. Thanks for joining us for First News at 5. Tammy has the day off. Violence at 2 women's clinics where abortions are performed tops our news today. 2 people died and several others were wounded when an armed gunman opened fire at 2 Boston clinics this morning. ABC's Kim Garris has more on these shootings.
I seen him. He was right behind me. He had a shotgun. I jumped over the wall. He was shooting everybody.
A man burst into a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic and opened fire with a rifle. Minutes later, an identical attack occurred at a second clinic a mile and a half away.
Yeah, he just turned the gun and just shot.
He drops the duffel bag, pulls out a rifle, a hunting rifle, big.
One person was dead at the scene, another died later at the hospital. 5 more shot multiple times. Police and ambulances raced to the shooting.
Other way.
He's in pretty good shape.
The attacker at both scenes was described by witnesses as a white male in his early 30s, though they won't confirm it's a single gunman. Authorities are quick to condemn the act.
This man is nothing other than a terrorist, and he cannot be permitted any form of satisfaction, neither he nor his like. And
Anti-abortion protesters regularly demonstrate outside the two clinics, but the demonstrations have never taken such a violent turn.
Well, I wish I could say that I am surprised. I'm appalled, but I guess I'm not surprised.
In Brookline, Massachusetts, I'm Kim Gareth reporting for ABC News.
Meanwhile, President Clinton denounced the attacks, calling them, quote, meaningless violence. Local abortion clinics are horrified by what happened today. In Greenville, this clinic on Lawrence Road has been the site of many protests, and operators say they never let their guard down. Workers at the clinic say they've received death threats through the mail and by phone. The clinic is protected by a 10-foot buffer zone imposed by a federal judge, but workers still don't feel safe.
Or some of the protesters down there who've been arrested for going inside our clinic, yelling at our clients. And there's no reason why, why we would think that we're immune. So what the clinic always tries to do is be very tough on security.
The Western Carolina Medical Center in Asheville also performs abortions. The center's assistant director said the threat of violence is always a concern, and they take security precautions when they have patients. And the director of Life Advocates, a pro-life group in Asheville, pointed out until it's known why the gunman went on a rampage.
Afternoon, talking with the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the director of the Marshal Service, the United States Attorney in Massachusetts, the head of the Criminal Division, and the head of the task force, trying to make sure that we do everything possible to identify who was responsible for today's attacks and to do whatever we can to prevent a reoccurrence. The Department of Justice is participating fully in the investigation, specifically the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office, in cooperation with the Clinic Violence Task Force and the ATF Bureau of the Treasury Department, are assisting state and local law enforcement officers on the scene in every way possible.
Earlier, Massachusetts Governor William Weld announced that state police...
Abortion clinics attacked again. 2 people are dead in Massachusetts. Helicopter pilot Bobby Hall heading home. And Newt Gingrich has second thoughts about his $4.5 million book deal.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Sitting in tonight, Forrest Sawyer.
Good evening. Once again, violence has struck abortion clinics, this time in a Boston suburb, in 2 separate attacks, just minutes and 1.5 miles apart. Gunmen shot and killed 2 people and wounded 5 others. This brings to 5 the number of people who have been killed in attacks on U.S. abortion clinics. President Clinton called the incidents domestic terrorism and vowed to bring it to an end. We have 2 reports, beginning with ABC's Jim Hickey.
4 of the victims were shot at this Planned Parenthood clinic.
Entrance wound in the back with no exit wound.
Eyewitnesses said a white man with dark curly hair, dressed in black, walked in, pulled a rifle from his duffel bag, and opened fire, hitting 2 people waiting for patients and 2 clinic workers.
1 victim was struck fatally and was pronounced dead at the scene.
That was the clinic's 25-year-old receptionist. 10 minutes later, 1.5 miles away, a similar attack. A gunman, possibly the same one, entered the preterm health services clinic and began shooting.
He said to the girl, one of the secretaries, "Is this preterm?" She said, "Yes." He drops the duffel bag, pulls out a rifle, a hunting rifle, big. She is now about 2 yards away. He hits her, impossible to miss.
He was shooting everyone in the hallway. Whoever was in the hallway, the security guard got shot, he was in the hallway. The lady in the purple coat was in the hallway. Whoever was in the hallway was who got shot.
What was he saying? In all, 3 people, 2 women and 1 man, were hit. One of the women, a clinic employee, later died at a hospital. At the Planned Parenthood clinic, workers said that before the shootings, a small band of abortion opponents staged a protest this morning. One of the women identified as among the protesters appeared horrified by the attacks. Anti-abortion protesters demonstrate at this clinic on a regular basis, and the head of this Planned Parenthood office said recently the staff had also been receiving telephone threats.
Let's stretch it right here.
Planned Parenthood officials say they have come to fear this sort of attack.
I wish I could say that I am surprised. I'm appalled, but I guess I'm not surprised.
So far, there have been no arrests. Tonight, there was a candlelight vigil for the victims outside the Planned Parenthood office. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Brookline, Massachusetts.
This is Michelle Norris. Planned Parenthood officials were so alarmed by the death threats against the Brookline Clinic that they say they had asked Attorney General Janet Reno to dispatch U.S. Marshals to guard the building.
One of my board members went to see the Attorney General last week to report on the nature of the death threats and urged that we have immediate clinic protection put into place.
The Justice Department said they were not aware of any formal request, but earlier in the year, Reno did send federal marshals to at least 24 other clinics across the country after anti-abortion activist Paul Hill gunned down a doctor and his bodyguard in Pensacola, Florida. Today, Reno pledged to step up federal efforts to combat abortion violence, but said that limited resources make that task difficult.
If you consider all the threats made in America, law enforcement does not have adequate resources to provide continuing protection for all threats.
A federal investigation is already underway to examine if there are any connections among the violent attacks on abortion providers across the country. Last week, a federal grant...
Their guard against violence. Capitol Hill prepares for the historic Republican takeover. Nightcast is next.
A wave of fear sweeps women's clinics across the nation. The feds offer protection.
A touch of winter blankets parts of Tennessee. Is it coming our way? Ken Bostic has the answer. Right on the heels of all those year-end car... Good evening and thanks for joining us. Darcel is on maternity leave.
President Clinton is taking action tonight in the aftermath of several shootings at abortion clinics in the South and East. He has instructed U.S. Marshals around the country to contact all abortion clinics to let them know they're available to investigate threats against the centers. Nightcast reporter Suzanne Hudson has the latest.
We're all appalled, and this is domestic terrorism, and hopefully the federal government will do something to stop it.
And today, federal marshals in Asheville took the first step. They went to a local abortion clinic, workers say, to teach them how to tighten security inside and outside the facility. And even though the marshal's office won't comment on its exact mission, the White House says on the orders of the president, the marshals are telling the workers if they are threatened or intimidated by pro-life activists, let them know so they can stop it. Both of the clinics that offer abortions in Asheville have met with federal marshals to discuss safety, but officials at those clinics say they're still afraid to talk to us on camera.
It just limits the power of women in their health care choices if places like ours are not allowed to function without having all this security.
But clinics across the Carolinas are reassessing their setup since the weekend shootings. That's when, in Massachusetts, 2 people, receptionists at 2 separate clinics, were killed at their desks. It's the 4th time in 2 years that abortion clinics have been the target of violent pro-life activists. A total of 5 people have died in the attacks. Federal marshals were dispatched to some clinics after the murder of an abortion doctor in Florida in 1993, but those officers were pulled out soon after when the Justice Department determined the threat was gone. Abortion rights activists know they can't have federal marshals in every clinic at all times. What they say they want is a full investigation into whether there's a group sponsoring these violent attacks on abortion clinics and whether there are any security tips that they can use to keep such violence from happening here. Suzanne Hudson, News 13 Nightcast, Asheville.
The president has not yet asked marshals to guard any abortion clinics, but the White House is reportedly planning to take a more active role in making sure such facilities are properly protected. One of Asheville's more vocal pro-life groups, Life Advocates, issued a statement late today saying their peaceful protests do not require the clinics to get extra security.
Now, what is next for the man accused of attacking 3 abortion clinics? John Salvi was arraigned today and remains jailed in Norfolk, Virginia. He's accused of killing 2 people and wounding 5 others in attacks on 2 abortion clinics in Massachusetts, then shooting up a clinic in Norfolk. Salvi's lawyer says his client hasn't decided whether to fight extradition to Massachusetts. More from reporter Anthony Everett.
John Salvi says he understands the charges against him. Understanding what happens next will be a bit more complicated. He decided today not to waive extradition, which means returning him to Massachusetts will be much more difficult. With Salvi, the weapon allegedly used in the shooting, and his truck all here in Virginia, officials are proceeding cautiously to protect the evidence and the prosecution.
We were working very closely with
authorities here and with federal authorities to get Mr. Salvi back to Massachusetts as soon as possible.
Salvi has asked to see a Catholic priest tonight. He claims he has food poisoning from jail food, and he also says he'll issue a statement to the media on Thursday.
I say he's in very good spirits. He's an intelligent young man, except for the fact that he complains of the blurred vision from the food poisoning. Otherwise, I found him very competent.
Salvi was arraigned on a weapons violation in Virginia, a fugitive warrant in Massachusetts. He could face federal unlawful flight charges, and his court-appointed attorney says Salvi understands the severity of the charges against him.
He wants to know what evidence there is and certainly what his options are, and those are things that certainly I don't want to expect him to make a major decision in a short period of time.
And that's why the decision was made not to waive extradition. It buys Salvi and his attorney some time to review their options. Their next scheduled court appearance comes at the end of this month on January 24th. In Norfolk, Virginia, I'm Anthony Everett, reporting for ABC News.
Federal prosecutors say they might file death penalty. Members of Life Advocates say people like Salvi use the wrong methods, and they say there's no need for increased security at clinics where they demonstrate because they are committed to nonviolence.
We do recognize that not everybody agrees with that, and there will be people that will respond to violence with violence, and we would like to discourage that. We'd like people to express that same level of commitment to come out and join us here.
Officials at FemCare had no comment on today's gathering.
Checking news from around the Carolinas, Spartanburg County coroners say their investigation indicates the death of Michael